All right. So, welcome. I am sitting here with Jenny Chen, who is both a humhum facilitator and also a sacred values coach, plant medicine guide, heart centered space holder, podcast host, and eternal student of the great mystery of life. And as a coach, Jenny empowers the world's rebels, rule breakers, and misfits to define, embody, and live from their sacred values. She believes life is sacred, and a core part of her mission is to guide souls into relationship with the sacred, beginning with the sacred relationship to oneself. Jenny is a certified somatic integration practitioner, a 200-hour registered yoga teacher, and sound healer, and considers cacao, mushroom, and ayahuasca her main plant allies. She regularly hosts ceremonial space for herself and others to connect to the wisdom within ancient plants, and is deepening her connection to the sacred medicine of cacao through a cacao ceremony facilitation training. So we're so grateful to have you. So I'm going to introduce the new narratives series, which is a storytelling series that is produced by humhum, which is designed to spark reflection and self-awareness, offering expansive perspectives and new blueprints and pathways for self-loving and healthy relationships. And we often find that there's kind of one way folks talk about relationships, and it's usually very outcome oriented and situationally oriented. And so we want to shift the perspective to focus more on the inner journey and what is happening with the situation within amid the situation without, so that we can start to grow and learn and map our relational pathway onto how our heart and life is shifting and changing. So welcome, Jenny. So good to have you. I wanted to see first if there's anything you want to add before we jump into some questions.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me on, Alexandra. It's such an honor to be part of the Hum Hum community as a facilitator. And I just want to give you so much thanks for the opportunity to facilitate, to work together, and to collaborate. And one other thing I'd love to share is that I truly believe this mystery that we call life is a ceremony. And that when we see that all of this is a container for us to expand, to grow, to see the magic in everything, and to approach each day with humility and openness and just trust. I feel like we'll really see that everything that shows up is meant for us, and life is truly so beautiful.
Thank you for that perspective. And maybe that's actually a perfect segue into one of our first questions, which is how has that perspective, how does that perspective differ from the perspective you initially maybe inherited or were taught, whether that was societally, culturally, familially, about relationships and dating? I think it's a good place to start. You teed us right up.
That's such a great place to start. Yeah, I believe that it truly is different because what I was taught was that relationships look a certain way and successful relationships look a certain way. And for me, that story that my parents told me that I heard from just being raised in the United States is that a successful relationship is that between a man and a woman. And that the pinnacle, or one of the pinnacles, right, is that you get engaged sometime in your mid 20s, late 20s, get married, buy a house, have kids, and just really settle down. But as I've just gone on my own healing journey, I've realized that that reality was very constricting and didn't feel aligned at all. And that my truth is actually fluidity, not only in terms of my beliefs around the number of relationships I'm allowed to engage in intimately, but then also what it means to realize that intimacy is not sex. and that sex is not the only way to be intimate with somebody, and that it is okay to be in a place where sex is sex, and like that type of relationship with somebody is not like the end all be all, and is not necessarily core to who I am or what I'm looking for in an intimate and loving relationship.
That's really helpful. And so, as you've kind of started to individuate and form your own path and have new ideas arise around partnership, intimacy, relationship, are you willing to share any like pivotal moments in your own like dating connection journey that have helped expand this sense of awareness for you in terms of what's true? Gets a little
Yeah,
intimate.
absolutely. And I feel like that actually touches on the type of intimacy that I most cherish, which is what I'll share first before diving in. But I really realized that the intimacy I most cherish is emotional intimacy. It's this intimacy where I feel like I can and I feel comfortable like undressing myself emotionally in front of someone else and know that I am held and that I'm seen and that I'm appreciated exactly as I am. And that there's no desire from the other person or people to change me because I'm just me and I'm going to show up, you know, in this shape, in this time, in this place in my life. And so I feel like knowing that some of the pivotal moments for me have really been over the last 2.5 years since I ended a major relationship where I thought that was the end all be all, you know? In fall of 2021, I ended a 6-year relationship where I was engaged and I had bought a house with my partner in the Bay Area. And in a lot of ways, I felt like so many people in my life put me on a pedestal because I had like reached the top of the mountain, or I'd reached these like, unspoken milestones around life and relationships and success. When on the inside, I felt so alone and gray and really just felt so out of alignment. And so the last 2.5 years have been this massive like deconstruction journey and journey home to myself. And in terms of relationships, it's not only been about really like for me working with medicine such as Aya, mushroom, and cacao, but then also entering relationships from a place of curiosity and asking myself, what can I learn? And I feel like some of the things that my most recent relationships have taught me is that it's really that like, yeah, I used to be in a place where I didn't feel like I was enough. And I feel like that's still a voice that comes up now and again. But in my past relationships, I've noticed that there was like this desire to be desired because I did not feel enough as I was. And what that manifested in was very honestly, and some of this is very new, but like I realized it manifested in exercising to achieve a certain physique, shaving and plucking my armpit hairs and my body hairs because I felt like the most beautiful, sexy, attractive woman was a woman who was groomed from that perspective. It meant wearing makeup and dressing a certain way because I thought that that was what would make me attractive and therefore make me feel like I was beautiful. But the reality is that when I really recognized that and recognized that there was this desire to be desired, and this also related to that, this like wanting to want sex. Because I'll be very honest, like the last year, I just haven't really been interested in having sex. And I've been reading this book on asexuality that has been so powerful and so potent in terms of like opening this portal for me to discover my truth. And what I realized is that so much of this wanting to want sex comes from this idea of like compulsory sexuality, and that all of us, normalcy is wanting to have sex. And in this season of my life where I don't want to, or I'm not really interested in it, I thought that there's something wrong with me. I thought that there was something medical that I need to fix, that I was broken. But over the last few days, really, and weeks, I've come to this place of deep self-acceptance, because I've also realized that not only in terms of this, but like zooming out, just because we understand something does not necessarily mean, or does not necessarily mean that it'll lead to deep acceptance. And right now I'm kind of dancing in a way and such that I want to give myself permission to understand, but also know what's core and what's true and what's most important is self-acceptance and self-love. So I'm very much in this place of, yeah, playing with asexuality, playing with my fluidity, and frankly, playing with like she, they pronouns, just because I had this like download a few days ago on a walk. I just heard they, because for me, they means that I'm not alone. I am part of something that's greater than myself, and like I'm channeling and connected to spirit. And so there was something so like beautiful about it coming to me in nature when I was walking. But yeah, those are just some of my thoughts.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. You had such a beautiful stream and flow of heart sharing, and so much of what you shared really strikes a chord. I've been talking to several folks actually recently who have shared that they've been wondering about being asexual, because also noticing like just a decreased sex drive or a shift in it, or just like, oh, hey, now that I'm actually in touch with my own desires, like this just isn't present. And some of them have just naturally connected to like probably an organic ebb and flow of that energy, and others are like, no, I actually do identify as asexual. So it's like, I just commend your journey and willingness to like look at this question. And I think you're so right that what it is to be conditioned as a woman, like to be conditioned like systemically as a woman. And I was feeling so much grief in my heart as you were sharing, because I've gone through some of my own um, journey around that same thing of like the body hair and like the working out and like the compulsive fitness stuff, just getting my body to look certain. I was like, who is this for ultimately? And so, yeah, just so much tenderness about that, and appreciating the vulnerability in your share in terms of the emotional intimacy as like the thing that's really sparking you, and the thing that is helping to open gateways of like, well, who am I interested in having relationship with, so um yeah. And it sounds like you're having different connections and relationships that are helping to spark some of these inquiries. So with that, if you can share a little bit about like, what is your core aliveness right now as it pertains to like a question you're in, and you kind of answered this in the first go, but like, what's a question you're holding on for yourself, or that you're holding for yourself about what it is to be in relationship, or like, it's like fluidity is in there, the exploration of genders in there, but yeah, is there a question that's really alive for you, or an experience that you're like thirsty for, that you're like, oh, I really want to explore X within myself?
Ooh, I love the framing. And I also just wanted to touch on a few things that you mentioned around the grief piece. I think that's been huge. And something that's really shifted within me is allowing myself to grieve those parts that, to your point, have been systemically conditioned by this, frankly, patriarchal system and society that we're a part of. And what I'm shifting into and what's been alive for me is honestly just building off of this idea of like sexual liberation, not just being like having sex as many times as you want, but having sex in whatever way that you want, including not choosing to engage in it. So even just like expanding upon that, what's alive for me is this idea of liberation. Like, what does it mean to liberate myself? And I really that then visualize this image of a bird within a cage, but the door of the cage is open and I just need to spread my wings and fly. And so I'm in this place where I'm most interested in connecting with individuals that would give me that permission to fly and with whom I can co-create a loving relationship with. And for me, I'm realizing I'm not really interested right now in defining exactly what that is. I feel like if I were to choose maybe a definition, maybe it would be closest to something like a queer platonic partnership. But essentially, what I'm looking for is a person or people with whom we can come together, draw a circle, create a container, and ask ourselves what exists within the container. What are the rules of the engagement? What are the, I like the hum like agreements that we're agreeing to? And what does it mean for us to engage in this dance together for as long as it serves us? Because as I mentioned before, what I'm really prioritizing is that emotional intimacy. And with that emotional intimacy can come forms of physical intimacy, but I'm very much in this place where like I have removed sex from the top of that hierarchy. It's not hierarchical for me. Like if I want a hug, I'll go for a hug, but it doesn't have to be like one thing leads to another. And then if I don't have sex, then it's not, intimate.
Yeah, just like the word permission comes to mind as you're sharing. It's like being in a collaborative dance with another being where there isn't some pre created idea about how you should both behave, what should be there. It's like discovering in the emergence what wants to arise. And like part of that open door is like releasing or being willing to release expectations or acknowledge that they're even there, that like, oh, I was hoping for X, but I see that that's not actually alive for you, and now I tend to myself to navigate that versus like need you to do something different, like that's, I think, often how we operate, is like we project our own expectations and hopes onto someone else and then get disappointed, or but like what is it like to actually stay in that dance? It's hard work. That's really like pretty advanced work, I feel like, relationally. And so I'm curious, like in your dynamics right now, any of the dynamics that you're finding nourishing, what are you noticing within those dynamics that are nourishing you and meeting you in this question?
Yeah. What a great question. And I love the framing too of emergence because it reminds me of birth and birthing something with somebody. It is really about multiple people and also bringing in like the universe and larger forces at play. But what I've noticed with the relationships that have been nourishing and have been able to meet me exactly as I am, like where I am, are um one, very emotionally deep, very much about being able to share whatever is most alive and present on our hearts and our minds. And there's this deep presence where we're not only fully with each other, but we see each other. And there's something so beautiful about that, and really about knowing that the eyes are like the windows to the soul, and to be able to like really connect soul to soul is what is most important to me. I've also noticed that the relationships that tend to be the deepest are those with whom they tend to be female bodied or female presenting. Not that I don't have male friendships, but I naturally gravitate towards like the feminine. And it's been really beautiful to notice as well, because even I still remember middle of last year where I was coming to terms with my potential bisexuality and feeling like I couldn't be bisexual enough if I didn't want to have sex with other women. And now I'm in this place of, yeah, just reconnecting with my fluidity and not feeling as though I have to attach to certain titles and that like I have to present or be in a certain way to exist and be enough as I am.
Yeah, this is, my heart is like bursting because I feel like what you're sharing, the way you were describing exploring the asexuality and how like sexual energy right now is just like not the thing for you. It's just not the thing. And so the fact that there's this idea that we need to have that determine our sexuality or like our queerness even, or who we're interested in to have intimacy with, it's like that's like you're like you said, just one layer of intimacy. And so I'm just appreciating the nuance and the subtlety to which you're talking about what is alive for you and like what's nourishing you and where you're finding it, and like not getting stuck in labels, because I think that's one of the challenges also, like across all sexuality. But I remember like when I was coming out, I was like, the labels thing is just not working for me. Like this is not, because I'm going to change like every week, honestly. And so I just have so much compassion for like, it's just
Uh-huh.
like, I don't, there's not a label that fits what I'm describing here. And here are all the things
Mhm.
that might be true for me. So just like deeply appreciating you in that inquiry and in that discovery, and um, on your journey. And I think this actually is a natural segue to the other question I had for you, which is like holding dating or relationships as a spiritual practice. What are you practicing with in this moment? Like, what is the practice for you? And what else are you discovering in holding that frame?
Yeah. I love that I really learned that from you and from Hum Hum, that dating really is a practice and it's about falling in love with and connecting with the journey of love, of life, of whatever it is. And what I've been practicing is fluidity, is really granting myself that permission to ask myself, what is it that I truly desire? And what is it like to act from that place of alignment with my desires? And that's been so, so powerful because that's why I've been so in love with this idea of like sacred values, and knowing that for me, my sacred values of ease, abundance, and expansion not only orient me towards the people that I want to connect with, but the opportunities and spaces where I know I'll be held, where I'll feel free, where I'll feel like I can be all parts of me. And one other thing I'll add is I've been really meditating on this idea that the map is not the territory. And that I think I shared this with you, this Whitney Hansen quote from her poem, that we are not a snap. Oh God, what was it? It was something like, we are not a snapshot, we are an eternity, something like that. But really just capturing that idea that, as you mentioned before, I feel like these labels and these titles and these words and frameworks that I'm now learning about are simply like doorways and entry points for me to explore my infinite self. It is not something that I need to attach to or feel like if I don't identify in such a way that I'm not enough. Because the reality is that we're all fluid, multi-dimensional beings, and that no title, no label can ever fully describe who we are. And so the liberation for me and the fluidity for me has been in not completely throwing out the labels. Like, I acknowledge their importance in helping others to understand ourselves and helping us to understand ourselves too. But really, the biggest thing for me is simply about practicing full and unconditional acceptance of, this is where I'm at, and there is nowhere else I need to be but here.
Mm, that almost sounds like its own sacred value. Would you consider acceptance a value? And like, how are you holding that frame of sacred values as like, these are the core values that I'm living into right now? Like that one, I've heard you talk about fluidity. I've heard you talk about, um, yeah, do you have a sense of like what are the ones that you're most experiencing right now or really appreciating?
Yeah, I feel like that acceptance and that fluidity really tie into ease and really flowing and just embodying water. Like that's what's been most alive for me, just connecting with that element into the natural ebbs and flows of time. And I feel like the more that I just surrender to this flow and the cycles of life, death, and rebirth, the more at ease and at peace I feel, knowing that like this is all there is.
Yeah, I love that. I feel similar in terms of like just seeing life as it is being a gateway to peace. And sometimes, yeah, it's like we might not even like what's happening or what's there, but being willing to fully acknowledge this is how it is, like in and of itself has a calming effect from what I've seen. And I was thinking about what you said about the map versus the territory. And I feel like that perfectly characterizes this like broader shift that humanity is going through from this Piscean to the Aquarian age around how like nobody else, like the inner authority versus outer authority, and like the exploration of, okay, so I got this map, here are the frameworks, here are the things I've like learned, and I have a sense of where things are, but like ultimately I have to discover life and the universe and like everything, within. And it sounds like that's been something that you're actively practicing with. And so I'm curious about, the other like, I don't know what I want to call it philosophies, but like tools, inspirations, practices that have helped. And I know you talk about plant medicine, but like have helped shape some of the way you're holding your dating and relational life right now. Like, what are some influences that have really helped shape and inform your perspective?
Mm, yeah. One thing I'll say first is you touched on this a little bit, but I'm reminded of the phrase as above, so below, as within, so without. And that's also something I've been really meditating on, realizing that I and so many others have been conditioned to look outward to others to know ourselves when truly it's about tuning in to ourselves and slowing down enough so that we can hear the whispers. And sometimes they're not whispers. Actually, sometimes our bodies speak to us in incredibly loud ways and they're asking for us to like wake up and just truly like remember who we are before the world told us who we're supposed to be. And so expanding upon that, very much related to plant medicine, but a framing that's been so helpful for me is like gnosis and Gnosticism, which is very much the idea that we must directly experience things to really know them. And so it's the prioritization of direct experience over an intellectual understanding of something. And that for me has been so powerful because I've realized I learned best by just freaking going out there and just experimenting. And it's so funny how my old life as a product manager comes in. I used to run A/B tests like for software for a company. And now it's something that I actively embody. It's like this experimental mindset, this like, you know, very much being hypothesis driven, holding my intention with a little bit of softness and asking myself like, how does it feel to connect with a man? How does it feel to put myself out there? How does it feel to pursue this thing that is so alive and that makes me feel so curious? And then knowing um, that simple experimentation is valuable, no matter what outcome comes of it. So, in addition to that, I've really been practicing detaching from the outcome and really trusting that life is going to unfold the way it's meant to. And that the more that I lean into and embody what's true for me, the more that those things and those people and those opportunities will show up.
Yeah. And I'm just hearing like how it does take courage to really stand in what's true, because we don't actually get to know like how that will change and how other people will be in response to that. And like I also have like an internal experimenter, very curious, like I wonder if this resonates with you, like you're t- in terms of what question you're holding and practicing right now. It's like, if I don't center like physical intimacy or sexual intimacy, what kind of intimacy opens up for me in connection? Like, is like, I almost don't feel like that's sort of one of the things you're like in discovery around, like what opens up or what gets liberated when I take the conditioning of that off the table and I don't have to like do things I don't want to do or like aren't. Yeah, so I'm curious if that resonates.
It really does. It's really, yeah, like freeing. And I even like the visual of just like taking the lid off this open container, just realizing, oh my God, I can explore all these different relationships and connections. And as long as I am true to myself and I'm really firm about what I'm looking for and my boundaries, then I can co-create whatever magic and whatever relationship that most serves me. Because also I'm in this place where I very much let go of like even needing to be married. I mean, I'm openly questioning whether I want to have children, but to truly be liberated, I think specifically from this idea that I need to be married has been so freeing in terms of allowing myself to explore connecting with people that I may not have otherwise, or even allowing myself to pursue certain friendships, because I used to think that unless they were, a 20-minute drive or something, that it wasn't worth it. But actually, so many of my deepest connections now are ones that I've cultivated online. And sometimes I haven't even met these people in person, but they feel so deep because for me, I know there's that soul connection.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, I love that question of like, if I let this thing go, or like, all these ideas you kind of talked a little bit about facets of the relationship escalator, like having to date certain people, having these core milestones, having it move in this direction, the engagement, the marriage, etc., like the children, like to almost like letting it go to actually discover your true desire, your true aliveness, like not throwing it out for the sake of throwing it out, but like, what would happen if I put that question down for right now? Like, if I'm like, let me just put marriage down as a thing that I need to like orient around, like what's opening up. So I really love that as a way to like create more space for your own truth to emerge. And it sounds like it's really been supportive to do that so far.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I feel like it's my evolution and where I am now has really been about creating space for that emergence. And creating space also means clearing out that space and really assessing that which is not serving me, whether it's conditioning, whether it's people, whether it's a way of being, of looking for other people. There's been a lot of releasing that, grieving that, shedding that skin, but also trusting that on the other side of that is freedom and is this aliveness that I'm seeking and I believe all of us deserve.
Mm-hmm. What is the hardest part that you're discovering about practicing this way, dating this way, living this way? What feels the hardest?
The hardest part of that is to continue to connect with my truth and to connect with my courage, because I feel like I've really learned the hard way that that fear and that anxiety may never go away. Like even yesterday, I did some parts work with somebody and realized that there's this 5-year-old part of me that's been protecting me. And I'm almost 30 this year. And for her to have played such an adult-like role for so long, she still wants to be here. But it's just a matter of renegotiating the terms of that relationship and making her feel safe, because she's told me that when she feels safe, that she can transform into this baby jaguar and that she can run alongside me. And it's less about like, you know, holding up a staff and being like, no one can pass, like you're gonna hurt me, like I'm here to defend you and like protect you. More about like, let me just play like I meant to. Let me just run around the sandbox and let me just really cheer you on and see how you're growing and flourishing. So I feel like that's the hardest part. It's about coming back to that and knowing that, yeah, I'm not here to please anybody else, and that I'd be doing myself and honestly the world and this coming evolution a disservice if I were to be small and to contract and to only behave or appear a certain way because I think that that is what would make people feel the most comfortable. And you're right, it's so hard, but it's so worth it to practice and to practice imperfectly, because, we're all human. That's why we're here, to practice and to hold each other in that practice.
So much. So we're coming up on time. I have one last question, and this one can be simple. Well, we'll see. It's, what is one piece of wisdom that you'd love to share with other people on their journeys who maybe, they're in a place that's similar to where you were a couple of years ago, or just in general, like one piece of wisdom that you have for the world? You've shared a lot already, so no pressure on this last one.
My one piece of wisdom is that you are the artist and sculptor of your one precious life here. You are the one who's meant to decide what colors and textures you're meant to splash on your canvas, even the size of your canvas, even if it's not a canvas. You know, you are really that captain and that magician. And when you're really able to remember and reclaim this place within your life, and really when you're able to decenter others and center yourself, that's when you're able to not only embody your power, but really embody your truth and embody what love and joy and bliss and alignment mean for you and only you. Oh, I can't hear you.
Oh, I was saying, I was like, thank you so much. And I was like, is there anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
I'm just so grateful to know you, Alexandra, and just so grateful for this opportunity to share what's been on my heart. Really, this came at exactly the right time. So I'm just really grateful. And I hope that my journey and some of the words that I share can help others on their journey too.
Thank you so much. And so for folks that want to learn more about Jenny, by jennychen.com. Jenny also has a newsletter called ampersand with jennychen.substack.com. Did I get that right? And then on Instagram, by Jenny Chen, JennyChen. And then Jenny has a podcast as well, and it's by Jenny Chen. So very consistent branding, Jenny. Good job. And
Yes.
so, yeah, And then a YouTube channel as well by _Jenny Chen. And we'll put all this into the YouTube link or the description. Thank you so much for sharing your heart, your wisdom, your journey. It's been such a delight talking with you, and so grateful to have you on the Hum Hum team. I know that you're really holding beautiful space for folks. And so I'm so glad to connect with you, know you, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of the day.
Thanks, Alexandra. Good to know you too, and excited to feature you on my podcast.
Yay. Looking forward to it. I'm going to stop the recording.